Welcome in the Quest Number 9 podcast. My name is Seth Warner, and on this podcast, we talk about Kentucky basketball from a fan's perspective. And today, we have someone here to help us talk about Kentucky's big St. John's win. Brandon Ramsey, how you doing, Brandon?
Hey, doing well, Seth. Thanks for having me on again. Always enjoy talking to you about some Kentucky basketball, and especially talking to you after a big win like we had on Saturday against St. John's.
Yeah, St. John's, Kentucky winning 76-66. Kentucky putting up big offensive numbers in the second half. What were kind of your takeaways from their big offensive performance and defensive performance to create those opportunities?
My big takeaway from the second half is, isn't it nice having a full roster?
Yes.
I think Jalen Lowe checked in with 17:07 to go in the second half. Jaden Quaintance came in with 16:07 to go in the second half. After Jaden Quaintance came in, Kentucky went on a 19-2 run over the course of the next about 6 minutes. That's not a coincidence. That's because Kentucky's best players were on the court. Now, is it always going to look like that? Gosh, I hope so, I guess, but I'm not necessarily going to go that far. But it's really, really good that it looked like that on Saturday. St. John's is a quality team. It's a good defensive team with some tough veteran guys, obviously very well coached by Coach Rick Pitino. And Kentucky just kind of dominated them in the second half. I've been saying it. Some of my friends at KSR have been trying to say it, that it's okay to critique this team along the way. Like, some of the complaints were warranted, like effort and energy. Some of those things, some of those non-negotiables weren't always there for this team. But it wasn't completely fair to kind of judge them in terms of big picture takeaways until we saw them with a full complement of players at their disposal. And quite frankly, when Jalen Lowe goes out 7 seconds into the first half, really the only time that we have been able to judge this team at full strength is the second half of this game. And guess what? We won by 19 points against a top 10 team or top 25 team in college basketball. So, as a fan, I'm going to be pretty excited taking away some things from this game when really the only half of basketball from this entire season that I have to properly judge Kentucky off of, it's a 52-53-34 win over St. John's. So I feel really good about what we saw in the second half. And now obviously it's all about keeping it going into Southeastern Conference play, which is right in the corner now.
Yeah. And with that first half, you were kind of talking about it. Kentucky ended up getting outscored by 9 points. So that was kind of my big thing. That first 10-minute section with this Kentucky team, those sections have been really big for Kentucky. First 10 minutes, we only ended up having, I believe, 3 turnovers in the first 10, but ended up having 7 in the last 10, and then only ended up having 6 in the second half. Ended up with 16 total turnovers. Just how has Kentucky been able to have some good, really good sections and some really bad?
Yeah, I think that some of that is that St. John's is a team that's obviously going to pressure you. I mean, we saw quite a bit of full court pressure. Kentucky didn't always handle that perfectly, but a lot of those turnovers honestly came in the half court. And I think that in terms of a difference between kind of big picture first half and second half, I would probably point back to having Jalen Lowe for about 15 minutes in the second half as opposed to 7 seconds in the first half. But obviously, as you mentioned, that at the beginning of the game, some of those turnovers weren't necessarily as big of an issue for Kentucky. And I think that as the game went on, I think St. John's got more comfortable in their pressure and we were really able to get after Kentucky as the game kind of got into its flow. And quite honestly, as Kentucky continued to struggle to score, that allows St. John's to ramp up that pressure. And there's a little bit of a snowball effect when you start talking about turnovers that I think as that first half went on, St. John's started scoring a little bit more. Kentucky wasn't scoring. Kentucky turns it over once or twice. Now that just kind of leads itself into the next one. And yeah, I think that part of that going forward, you're talking about how Kentucky starts games. Quite frankly, I think we're going to need to start seeing our best players start the games.
Mm-hmm.
And now that Jalen Lowe is healthy and it appears we dodged a major bullet with what was a pretty big scare to all of us in the first half, I think that seeing him start games now as a point guard to be able to establish this offensive identity earlier as opposed to having to wait to have him come save the day in the second half. Same thing maybe with Jayden Quaintance. Like, Malachi Brandt has been great. He hasn't done anything to lose his starting spot. But let's face it, Jaden Quaintance is the better player. He needs to play 25 plus minutes, and Malachi now become as good as he's been as a starter. He's even a better backup. So let's start getting these guys in there earlier and really maximize their minutes. And I think that's something that you're going to be watching for certainly as we get into SEC play when the new year comes around.
Yeah, and kind of what you were talking about, having Malachi Moreno more as the backup and him and Brandon Garrison, I think that will fit their roles a little bit more, not making those guys do too much because Brandon sometimes, he had several really good moments in this game, had a couple blocks, couple steals, but when you have him out there for long durations, is kind of my thought, is he has a couple good plays, couple bad plays, and then he'll start stacking some bad plays.
Absolutely. And I think that that's one of the exciting things about getting this team healthy is that it's not just about oh, it's great that we have Jalen Lowe back. Oh, it's great that we have Jaden Quaintance back. It's also then, as you just said, what it does to everyone else's role. It puts them in a situation where they're so much more comfortable because now you're in a position where if you're playing Jaden Quaintance, 20 to 25 to 30 minutes as the starter, and then you have Malachi Moreno come off the bench, you can allow Brandon Garrison to give you those short bursts of energy where he can be really good. And then if it's one of the days where we're getting some good Brandon Garrison, then he's going to earn an extra rotation and maybe he plays 10 minutes that game. If he comes in and isn't contributing or doesn't have it that day or whatever it may be, then you don't really have to ask him to do anything at all. He can just go back to the bench and roll with the other guys. I think that's what you're going to see, whether it's Cam Williams and Trent Noah kind of jockeying for minutes. So, hey, we're going to play each of them, and whichever one makes a shot in their first rotation is going to earn that, that second rotation. So I think that's one of the very good things about depth is that now Kentucky finally has their we've talked about depth all season with this team, but this is the first time we've had depth because now you're getting everybody back at your disposal. I think the exciting thing about depth, it's not that you're going to play 11, 12, 13 guys every game. What's exciting about depth is that those 8th, 9th, 10th pieces for any given game can be different. It doesn't have to be Brandon Garrison today. It doesn't have to be Trent Noah today. But guess what? Each of those guys is going to have a really big role in a Kentucky win at some point this season. We just don't know what game that's going to be. And it doesn't have to be every game because when it's not them, it can be Moreno and Cam Williams. And I think that's what you're going to see from Kentucky going forward is starting to be able to reap the benefits of some of that depth that we've all been excited about since before the year.
And with Jaden Quaintance and his impact, his ability to impact the game defensively, and I don't think his offensive game has really been explained enough with, to me, his ability to fit that Amari Williams role as much as people don't understand how well of a ball handler. I think he showed some of that, and I think he'll continue to stack some of those, showing DHOs and be able to drive, straight line drives, and something that I think will allow another dimension to this Kentucky offense.
We saw it in one of the very first plays that he made in the second half where he essentially went ISO one-on-one from 30 feet from the basket. Jalen Lowe threw it to him well above the top of the key, and he just broke his guy down, kind of drove it left a little bit and laid it in at the rim. So, yeah, I think comparing him to Amari Williams, is he going to be the passer that Amari Williams was? No. But do I think that he can handle the ball? Maybe even better. Can he score it? Maybe even better than Amari Williams did, at least on an individual basis. Absolutely, and I think that will be something that you see. You think back to. I know he wasn't outstanding against Kentucky, but you think about a guy like Caleb Williams or Caleb Wilson for North Carolina, some of the plays that he can make as a 6'10" athletic, skilled forward. Jaden Quaintance can do some of those same things off of the dribble as a creator from the perimeter. And when he's matched up against other 5 men, some guys that are bigger, more lumbering, not necessarily as agile or as athletic, then I think you're really going to see Jaden Quaintance exploit some mismatches going forward with what he can do off of the dribble. So I absolutely think talking about ball handling for this team overall, obviously Jalen Lowe getting him back from a playmaking standpoint is huge, but on a kind of a positional basis, I'm also really excited about what you can get from Jaden Quaintance on the offensive end as sort of a one-on-one creator and a guy that can really exploit some mismatches and be a true scoring threat for Kentucky offensively.
Yeah. And with
You're good. I still got you.
Okay. You froze for a second. And with Kentucky and Jayden Quaintance, and also being he can do all those things at 255 with his length and like we talked about his defensive versatility, I kind of brought up. And how many shots like he was able to not just block but affect was kind of one of my takeaways.
Absolutely, but it's what makes him one of the best defenders in college basketball. Certainly one of the best interior defenders in college basketball. Because you're right, when you're talking about National Defensive Player of the Year, when you're evaluating defense, it can be easy to just go look at the block column, look at the steals column, and say, all right, who are the best defenders? But there's a lot more that goes into that, as you know, and he's really good at some of those additional intangible things. Yeah, he's going to have some of the counting stats. He's going to average probably a couple blocks a game for as long as he plays at Kentucky. He's going to average a steal plus per game as long as he plays at Kentucky. But he's also going to make guys miss 5 to 10 shots a game. He's going to alter all these different shots. He's going to stop drives from happening before they even happen because guys know, like, well, there's no sense in even driving into the paint because guess who's going to be there waiting on me. So I think that even just psychologically, the impact that he has on an opponent's offense is really immeasurable. And that's something that Kentucky is certainly going to benefit from defensively, is just that presence. Again, it goes so far beyond what would even show up in the box score, but what he does to deter and discourage and change shots and change offense in general for opponents is what makes him truly special on that end of the floor.
Yeah. And with him, and then also Jalen Lowe, another guy after we talked about his injury and him returning from the locker room and playing in the second half, I thought his ability to finish through contact in the second half and trusting that shoulder more was a big thing for me.
Absolutely. I thought that he really displayed his toughness in that second half with, it's one thing to come back and play in the second half, but it's another thing to have the confidence that he seemed to have where it was like, hey, my shoulder's fine. Like, if nothing else, I think probably the first half it scared him a little bit. He felt the shoulder, pull around some, and he probably thought, oh crap, this isn't good. There went my season. And then after, being able to calm down and let the emotions drain a little bit, I think he realized, oh okay, no, like I'm bouncing back. I'm fine. It hurt a little bit, but I'm okay. And yeah, he was able to drive it in there with some confidence, play through some contact, get fouled, fall down to the floor a couple of times, and get back up. And I really saw the same thing from Jaden Quaintance. One of the plays that really stood out to me was when St. John's had a run out, and Jaden Quaintance didn't make the play, but he chased it down as hard as he could and ended up like kind of going into the stands a little bit. Like, man, that's a guy that's not worried about his knee right now. And I think that translated to Jalen Lowe with his shoulder, which I think is a very big part of getting over injuries, is when you start to play as if you're not thinking about it. And to me, that was one of the most encouraging things about Kentucky's guys that came back from injury, was that when I watched that game on Sunday or on Saturday, I never thought, like, it kind of seemed like he's favoring something or thinking about it. It just seemed like they were playing basketball as perfectly healthy individuals.
Yeah. And then kind of, as Matt Jones said, with Otega Owe having a quiet 20-point game, another performance from him coming out, I thought he did some good defensive things too. What were your thoughts on his performance?
I'm going to say it was maybe his best performance of the season. And then the reason I kind of stopped myself was because I feel like I've said that like 3 or 4 times in the last 5 games, but I think it's true. And I think we're starting to see him play to the potential that we all thought that he would reach in the preseason. I said it in a tweet after the game yesterday. It's easy for us all to get excited, and we should get excited about Kentucky getting back to full strength now and having the full disposal of players. But one of the things that we were missing, even though he was here, we were missing SEC Player of the Year caliber Otega Owe.
Yeah.
We hadn't seen that through the first month or so of the season, and now we're starting to get that sort of player out of him. So I think that as Kentucky fans, we're talking about missing Jalen Lowe. As Kentucky fans, we're talking about missing Jaden Quaintance. When Mo Diabate was out, those are all easy things to point to. But quite frankly, Otega Owe was one of the biggest missing pieces as well. Even though he was playing in the games, he wasn't playing up to that All-American type of caliber that had been bestowed upon him before the season. So I think that now that we're seeing him become quote unquote the guy for Kentucky, and certainly the guy that we were hoping that he would be in year 2 here in Lexington, that's almost like adding another really, really important player, because what he's been recently and certainly what he was against St. John's on Saturday is unlike what we were getting from him in a couple of the early games in Michigan State, Louisville, North Carolina, some of those early losses that Kentucky took. This is a different Otega Owe than we saw in some of those games.
And and Cam Williams was able to come out and knock down a couple shots. Big thing for him and his confidence. How do you think that moves Kentucky forward as could be a starter or big time bench piece, scoring 11 points and being 2 for 5 from the 3-point line?
It was good to see him make a couple shots, and man, those transition threes that he hit, both from Jaylen Lowe, were huge. It was a big part of that run. I talked about when Lowe and Quaintance came in and Kentucky went on that 19-2 run. There was a 14-0 run in there at one point. I know, like, those shots were a huge part of that momentum swing in Kentucky's favor. And I've talked about it throughout the season that I think he came in to the last game 7 for 33 from 3. I think now he's 9 for 38, I guess. Obviously, it's still not a very good percentage, but I think that you're going to slowly see him progress to the mean and get to the mid-30s, high 30s, wherever he ends up. He'll get there. He's too good of a shooter. He came in having made 60-something threes at 41.2% at Tulane last year. Shooting generally translates, and I'm not worried about him as a shooter. And one of the things, and I've talked about this recently, and there's been some other talk on social media as well, the reason that Cam Williams has been able to earn so many minutes even while not doing the thing that he was recruited to do, and that's catch and shoot and make threes, is he's turned himself into like one of Kentucky's best defenders. I mean, he is a lockdown defensive threat for Kentucky with his length, with his athleticism, the effort that he provides on a possession-by-possession basis. So that's what's allowed him to stay on the floor while not making shots. And now, as he starts to make those shots and he progresses to his career mean as a three-point shot maker, then that's just going to make him even more valuable, because now you're going to add in an offensive component to what has been a pretty darn impressive defensive component for Cam Williams. So I was excited to see him get a couple big shots to fall, and we certainly hope that that's just the kind of the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, as we get him rolling heading into Southeastern Conference play, because somebody does need to make the shots, or we all had fun during the comeback yesterday, but quite frankly, shooting is still an issue right now. I think Kentucky's below 32% now on the season. Your ceiling is not as high as it should be when that's the case. Now, am I overly worried about that continuing? No, I think they're going to improve. Do I think they're going to be as good of a shooting team as we thought in the preseason? Also, probably not. So,
Yeah.
The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle there. And hopefully sooner rather than later, with getting a Cam Williams and guys like that hot, hopefully you'll start to see Kentucky kind of even out and find their footing from 3-point range.
Yeah, and Kentucky was able to play 9 guys in double-digit minutes, with Brandon Garrison the lowest at 12. So with that rotation trying to fill itself out with adding new guys, what are your kind of outlook on that going forward, getting closer to SEC play?
I don't envy those having to make the decisions because, I think, and I did it a couple of days ago. I put out a tweet of sort of something that I thought might be the minutes rotation, or what could be the minutes rotation going forward. And man, it's freaking hard to decide like who's going to play minimal minutes, because it has to be somebody. Like, if there's only 200 minutes to go around for your team on a game by game basis. So if you give one player some of the minutes, it's coming directly from somebody else. And I think that it goes back to what I said about depth. Like the exciting thing about depth isn't about playing 12 guys in any given game. It's that as you shrink that rotation to 9 to 10, whatever it ends up being, that those final couple pieces can be somebody different on a game-to-game basis. I mean, heck, the last two quality wins now that Kentucky's had. Andrei Yelovich hasn't played a part in those, and he was a really big part of almost beating North Carolina. Like at some point, I think he's going to get back in there and have a valuable role in some games. I think Trent Noah is going to make some threes and be a valuable part of a win. I think Brandon Garrison is going to bring his energy and what he can do and be a valuable part of some wins. But then you're also going to have games where probably everybody I just mentioned literally might not get into the game at some point going forward. So I think that managing the minutes, managing the workload, managing, quite frankly, guys being upset with their minutes is going to be something that you have to watch going forward. It's really the only, I don't even know if it's a negative byproduct, but it's the tough byproduct of getting healthy and getting to full strength is now, some of those decisions used to be made for you because you didn't have 13 players to play. Now you have all your guys at your disposal, so you really have to make some of those hard decisions. So seeing how those shake out will be very interesting going forward. But to me, I'm excited about the fact that you can kind of, on a matchup by matchup basis, put guys in positions to succeed night to night in terms of the rotation.
Yeah, and you were talking about that. I feel like Kentucky has a lot of different answers for different problems. Where Kentucky, if we need to play faster pace, we need to be bigger, we need to be more athletic. That's one thing that last year didn't really have. I feel like if Kentucky gets hot with their shooting, they can really kind of match up and play with different paces and different styles. Like you were saying, once to average itself out, or kind of like sources say, I was listening to them, they were talking about making shots at the right moments or being optimistic in their shot making.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to the shooting, I mean, you were saying it before we went live, like getting some of those higher quality threes that Jalen Lowe's going to create, that will be a part of making more of them. I mean, the perfect example, and again, you brought this up before we were live, of that the kick out to Colin Chandler. I just posted on Twitter before I came on here too. Like that was the play that to me, like, so perfectly encapsulates the difference between Kentucky offense with and without Jalen Lowe, even though he didn't make that shot, because more times than not, he's going to make that shot. Or if that's Trent Noah, he's going to make that shot. If that's Cam Williams, he's going to make that shot. Otega Owe, he's going to make that shot. He missed that one. That's not the point. But getting guys those wide open looks is what Jalen Lowe's going to do. So you're going to get higher quality threes. You're going to get more open threes. Something I talked about a few weeks ago was how Kentucky was having to shoot so many of their threes from so far beyond the arc because we weren't getting the dribble penetration. So in order to create that space, to create a closeout, you had to step further behind the line. I think you're going to get more towed up to the line now with Jalen Lowe in the game and the penetration that he can provide, playing inside out, even some through Jayden Quaintance, et cetera. So I'm with you. I'm optimistic about where the shooting can go, but still, quite frankly, you do need to see the shots go in at some point, because the shooting numbers to this point, and certainly recently, even in these last couple of wins, have not been very good. So to beat teams like Alabama in Tuscaloosa, which is going to be played in about 12 days, you're going to need to make some shots, or it's going to be hard to score enough to beat teams like that.
Yeah, and in that clip or moment you were talking about with that Colin Chandler three, my probably favorite part of that was Jalen Lowe and his eyes. When he was driving, Cam Williams was on the wing, and he was able to completely look off that defender and have him bite on Cam Williams that had already made 2 threes in the game. And that just shows his basketball IQ and his ability just to manipulate the game is my.
Exactly. No, it's well said, because yeah, he's able to process things and manipulate things from a live dribble that the other guys on Kentucky can't do. Like when Denzel Aberdeen, when Otega Owe drive it to the basket, they're pretty gifted in terms of their athleticism and the way they can go score it. But in terms of like processing and reading everything going on around them, it's much more of a one-track mind for those guys. Whereas Jalen Lowe can drive it with the thought of like, I don't know yet whether I'm going to score it or whether I'm going to pass it to a teammate. Whereas other guys kind of have to make up their mind a little bit sooner. Jalen Lowe, as you said, he's able to get in there, keep a guy on his hip, use his eyes to look people off, get somebody going one way so that he can pass it another. And you're absolutely right. He completely got that guy to close out to Cam Williams just with his eyes, and then was able to no look at right on target to Colin Chandler. And like I said, he missed that shot fine. It kind of screwed up the clip from what we're talking about. But when you break it down further, the maker of the miss isn't the point. It was the creation of that shot. And I'm confident those type of shots will continue to be there. And those are the ones that Kentucky will hit. And you'll start to see that average matriculate up a little bit.
Yeah, and you're talking about that upcoming trip to Tuscaloosa coming up, our first game in January after we have Bellarmine coming up on Tuesday. Kentucky's going to have a big kind of break in practice to start getting things ramped up for SEC play. What are your kind of takeaways from that big gap of practice for Kentucky and how they're going to have a little bit of a holiday break, but how they're going to get everybody back in rhythm and keep up this momentum?
Quite frankly, I think other than it breaking up the positive momentum some, I think it couldn't come at a better time. And I'm really glad that you have this relatively extended break, probably as long of a break as you normally would get in a college season, 10 days really between the Bellarmine game and going to Tuscaloosa. And quite frankly, we know that you're probably not going to have to play everybody significant minutes against Bellarmine. I do hope that you play guys like Jalen Lowe and Jayden Quaintance still to just keep their feet under them, keep them confident and all that. But we're talking about they can maybe play 12 or 15 minutes on Tuesday against Bellarmine as opposed to having to play 25 to 30. But I think just, keeping those guys healthy, giving them a nice break after getting back in there and now being able to get back into the training room and making sure that they are bouncing back in the way that they need to bounce back before you get into a grueling, Wednesday, Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday SEC slate. I think that's going to be big for those guys coming off injury to get some time to rest and recover before you get into these big games. And for everybody else, I think it's kind of a get right time. Like you can get into you can on Christmas Day, like go get some shots up with your dad in your high school gym, and go work out with your trainer back home maybe to get up some extra shots and kind of forget about all the outside noise and maybe get back to your roots a little bit and find some ways to gain some confidence. Some of the guys that aren't making shots right now, maybe a day or two away, and then kind of coming back fresh and reset will be what they need to really get it moving forward. So I think getting this nice break with some positivity on the front end of it, and then getting to rest and recover going into what is always a grueling SEC schedule. Honestly, I couldn't have drawn up the schedule probably much better from that standpoint.
And that's all from the Quest Number 9 podcast. Brandon, do you want to tell everybody where they can find your work?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at BRamseyKSR. All the written work goes on KentuckySportsRadio.com. You can also subscribe to the Kentucky Sports Radio YouTube channel where Zach Gagan and I host the Zoom Action Film Breakdown show. You can also find my own film breakdowns on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel, so go subscribe there as well. And again, all of that gets promoted through my Twitter at BRamseyKSR.
Yep, would highly recommend all that. If like and subscribe on this video, and to stay up to date to any new episodes or anything, go follow me at Quest Number 9 on Instagram and Twitter. And I will see you next time.